The sun, a lazy gold coin, was just beginning its slow climb over the crest of the mountains, painting the quiet town of Oakhaven in soft, warm light. On the main street, the dust was still settled, and the only sound was the cheerful jingle of the bell above the door of Miller's General Store. Inside, the air smelled of sawdust, dried beans, and leather. Mia Miller, a young woman of 18 with kind eyes the color of autumn leaves and hair the shade of rich earth, stood on her tiptoes, stretching as high as she could. Her fingers, dusted with a fine layer of flour from the morning's baking, strained to reach the very top shelf where the last few cans of peaches needed to be arranged. She was not a tall person, and the shelf seemed to tower over her, a wooden giant demanding to be conquered. With a small grunt of effort, she managed to nudge the final can into place, but the movement was clumsy, and the smooth metal cylinder slipped from her grasp. It clattered onto the wooden floorboards, rolling away in a wobbly, noisy path just as the front door opened. The doorway, for a moment, was entirely filled. The morning light was blocked out, casting a long, dark shadow that stretched across the entire store, reaching Mia's feet. She froze, her heart giving a sudden, frightened leap in her chest. It was Elijah. Everyone in Oakhaven knew Elijah, the rancher from the high pasture. He was known for his way with spooked horses and his strength that could lift a fallen calf without strain. But to Mia he was simply enormous. He had to duck his head to clear the doorframe. His shoulders were so broad they seemed to fill the space, and his hands, hanging at his sides, looked like they could cradle a loaf of bread and crush a rock with equal ease. He was a quiet man, his face often serious under the wide brim of his hat, and his silence only added to the mystery of his size. Mia, who had always been shy around most people, found him utterly terrifying. As he took a step forward, his shadow fell over her completely. A wave of pure, childish fear washed over her. He was so close, so much bigger than anything she was used to. The words tumbled out of her mouth before she could stop them, a high, nervous exclamation. "You're so much bigger than me." Her face instantly flushed a bright, hot red, and she wished more than anything she could take the words back. Elijah stopped moving. He had seen her flinch. He saw the wide, fearful look in her eyes, and his own gentle heart sank a little. He was used to people being surprised by his size, but the pure fright on Mia's face was different. He didn't want to be a source of fear for anyone, least of all for her. He had noticed Mia before, of course, how she always had a kind word for the older folks in town, how she hummed hymns while stocking shelves, but he had always kept his distance, fearing exactly this reaction. Slowly, carefully he knelt down. It was a deliberate movement, making himself smaller, less of a threat. His knees popped softly on the wooden floor. He reached out, not towards her but for the escaped can of peaches. His large, calloused fingers, which could rope a steer, closed around the can with surprising delicacy. He stood up just as slowly, his great height uncoiling, and placed the can gently, silently on the counter between them. Then he took 2 deliberate steps backward, giving her all the space she needed. His voice, when he finally spoke, was a low, soft rumble, like distant thunder on a summer night. "I'll be gentle," he said. The words hung in the air between them. Mia stared at him, her fear beginning to recede, replaced by a swirling confusion. His voice wasn't what she expected. It wasn't a giant's booming command. It was a promise. He had knelt. He had given her space. He had spoken softly. These were not the actions of a monster, they were the actions of a gentleman. The seed of a new thought was planted deep in her mind. Perhaps she had been wrong. He completed his business quietly, buying a bag of nails and a new whetstone, his movements slow and predictable so as not to startle her again. He paid, tipped his hat to her and left, the doorbell jingling softly behind him. Mia stood frozen for a long time, staring at the can of peaches on the counter. Her heart was no longer pounding from fear, but from a strange, new feeling she couldn't quite name. A few days later, trouble arrived at the Miller farm. Their old plow horse Daisy had gotten herself stuck in a muddy ditch near the creek, and she was too old and too stubborn to get out. Mia's father and brothers pulled and pushed, but the mud was thick and Daisy was heavy with panic. "Fetch Elijah," her father finally said, his face grim. "He's the only one who can manage her." When Elijah arrived, he assessed the situation with a calm eye. He didn't rush in shouting and pulling. He walked slowly to the edge of the ditch, his voice a low, steady murmur. "Easy now, girl. Easy." He didn't see a problem to be muscled through. He saw a frightened animal. He spent long minutes just talking to Daisy, his deep voice a soothing rhythm, until the horse's frantic whinnies softened into nervous snorts. Then and only then did he move. He placed his great hands on her, not with force but with a firm, guiding pressure. He didn't yank or strain against her fear. He worked with her, coaxing and lifting, using his immense strength not to dominate but to assist. With a final, sucking sound, the mud released the horse and Daisy scrambled onto solid ground. Mia watched the entire scene from the farmhouse porch, her hands clasped tightly together. She saw the care in his every movement, the patience in his face. She saw that his strength was a tool he used with wisdom and kindness. The fear that had lived in her heart for so long began to crumble, replaced by a solid, warm feeling of respect. That night as she knelt by her bed, she prayed. She asked God to forgive her for judging someone by their appearance, and to help her see the heart inside, just as he did. The next Sunday after the church service, she saw Elijah standing alone under the big oak tree, looking out over the graveyard. Gathering every bit of her courage, she walked over to him, her Sunday dress swishing around her ankles. He turned as she approached, his expression unreadable. I wanted to thank you, she said, her voice barely above a whisper, for helping with Daisy. Elijah looked down at her, and for the first time, Mia didn't see a giant. She saw a young man with kind, tired eyes and a small, hesitant smile touching his lips. He simply nodded. Was glad to help, Miss Mia? And in that quiet moment, under the shade of the oak tree, a tiny, fragile friendship began to grow, its roots reaching deep into the fertile soil of a corrected misunderstanding and a gentle, kept promise. The seasons turned in Oakhaven, each one leaving its gentle mark upon the town and upon the hearts of its people. The crisp gold of autumn gave way to a winter that draped the mountains in a thick, silent blanket of white. Then the thaw came, and 1,000 little streams chattered their way down the hillsides, bringing with them the tender green shoots of spring. Through it all, a quiet understanding had grown between Mia and Elijah, as steady and predictable as the sunrise. It began with those brief, polite conversations after church, where Elijah would ask after her family and Mia would compliment him on the health of his cattle that he'd driven to market. Then he began walking her home from the Sunday service, a full 3 paces beside her, his long legs taking careful, shortened strides to match her own. He never tried to take her arm, never stood too close, but his presence became a constant, a sheltering oak she had learned not to fear but to appreciate. Their friendship was a slow and careful dance, built on shared smiles across the general store and the occasional basket of fresh eggs Mia would send home with him from her family's farm. Elijah, in turn, would sometimes leave a neatly wrapped packet of wild honey or a small, expertly whittled wooden bird on the miller's porch, gifts without demands, tokens of a quiet affection that asked for nothing in return. Mia found herself looking for him, her heart giving a little lift when she saw his tall figure in the distance. The fear was a distant memory, like a story read long ago. In its place was a deep and abiding admiration for his steady character, his quiet faith that showed not in loud words, but in hard work and kindness to all creatures. She saw the way he treated his animals, the patience he had with the town's young, mischievous boys, and the respect he showed every person regardless of their station. It was on a perfect spring afternoon, with the air sweet with the scent of apple blossoms, that Elijah found his courage. He met Mia on the path near the creek, the one they often walked after church. The water bubbled cheerfully beside them, a soundtrack to his nervously thumping heart. He stopped, turning to her, his hat in his hands, his large fingers worrying the brim. "Mia," he began, his voice even softer than usual, "these past months, walking with you, talking with you, they've been the best of my life." He took a deep breath, his gaze fixed on her face, so full of hope it was almost painful to see. "I would be honored, more honored than I can say, if you would allow me to court you. Properly. With the intention of a skin for your hand in marriage if you'd have me." The words hung in the blossom-scented air. Mia's breath caught in her throat. A part of her, the part that had come to know and cherish him, wanted to shout yes, with a joy that would have echoed through the valley. But from the deep, shadowy corners of her heart, the old fear, thought long dead, uncoiled. It was not a fear of him, not anymore, but a fear of the future he was painting. Courtship. Marriage. A life together. The image of his immense size, which she now knew housed a gentle soul, suddenly merged with the unknown intimacies of marriage. The thought of being that close, of being a wife to this giant of a man, sent a cold jolt of pure primal anxiety through her. Her face paled and she took a small, unconscious step back. The movement was tiny, but to Elijah, it was as clear as a shout. "Elijah." "I can't," she whispered, the words tearing from her. "I'm so sorry. You are a good man, the best of men. But I'm just too afraid." The light in Elijah's eyes dimmed, like a snuffed candle. The hope on his face crumpled, replaced by a profound sadness that seemed to make his broad shoulders slump. But he did not get angry. He did not press her or question her. He simply nodded slowly, his gaze dropping to the hat in his hands. "I understand," he said, his voice a rough whisper. He looked up and his eyes, though full of hurt, held no blame. "My care for you will never change, Mia. I promise you that. I will always be here if you need a friend." He placed his hat back on his head, the gesture final. I'll pray for your happiness." And with that, he turned and walked away, his long strides carrying him down the path and out of her life. For Mia, the world did not so much end as it simply lost its color. The apple blossoms lost their scent, the birdsong became noise, and the sun seemed to shine with a little less warmth. The silence where his presence had been was a physical ache. She went through the motions of her days, stocking shelves, baking bread, tending the garden, but her heart was a heavy stone in her chest. She had been a fool. She had let a childish, nameless fear push away the most kind-hearted, honorable man she had ever known. She saw the hollow echo of her days stretching out before her, and the emptiness was terrifying. That night, and for many nights after, she fell to her knees by her bed, tears soaking her pillow. "Dear Lord," she prayed, her voice choked with regret. "I was blind. I let fear guide me instead of faith. I saw the strength you gave him and I called it a monster. Forgive me. Show me what to do. Give me a courage I do not have on my own." The answer did not come in a flash of lightning, but in the slow, steady dawning of a conviction. She had to make this right. She had to be as brave as he had always been gentle. The thought of facing him, of seeing the hurt she had caused, filled her with dread, but the thought of never seeing him again was infinitely worse. 1 week turned into 2, and the conviction only grew stronger, fueled by a faith that told her redemption was always possible. She found him on a Saturday, mending a fence on the far edge of his ranch. The rhythmic thump-thump-thump of his hammer was the only sound. He saw her coming and stopped, the hammer falling silent in his hand. He did not smile, but he did not turn away. Mia's heart felt like it was trying to beat its way out of her chest. She stopped a few feet from him, her hands clasped tightly in front of her apron. "Elijah," she began, her voice trembling. "I owe you the biggest apology a person can give. I was wrong. So terribly wrong. I was scared of your size, but I see now that God gave you a big body to house an even bigger heart. I was a fool to let fear steal my future." She took a step closer, her eyes pleading with him to understand. "You are the best man I know. If the offer still stands, I would be honored to accept your courtship. I am not afraid anymore." For a long moment, Elijah was perfectly still, his expression unreadable. Then a slow, radiant smile broke across his face, so bright it seemed to light up the whole pasture. The sadness in his eyes vanished, replaced by a joy so profound it made Mia's breath catch. "The offer never left my heart, Mia," he said, his voice thick with emotion. "Not for a single day." Their official courtship was a sweet, slow, and proper unfolding of two hearts becoming one. They spent their time in the company of her family, sharing meals where Elijah's quiet laughter became a familiar sound. They took long walks, talking of their hopes and dreams, of a family of their own, and of the faith in God that would be the foundation of their home. Elijah's love was as patient and steady as he was, a constant, reassuring presence. After several months of this blessed courtship, Elijah, with his heart full of a love he had never dared to hope for, went to Mia's father. He asked for her hand in marriage not with boasts or promises of wealth, but with a simple, sincere account of his love for her and his ability to provide a good, God-fearing home. Her father, who had seen the transformation in his daughter and the quality of the man before him, gave his joyful blessing. The wedding was held in the small white church where their friendship had first begun to grow. Mia wore a simple but beautiful dress, her face glowing with a happiness that needed no adornment. Elijah stood at the altar, looking taller and more handsome than ever, and when he saw her walking toward him, the love in his eyes was a promise for all to see. They spoke their vows before God and their community, pledging their lives to one another, a perfect union of a gentle strength and a courageous heart, finally and forever joined. The little house that Elijah had built with his own hands, log by sturdy log, sat nestled in a sunny meadow on the high pasture, a testament to his love and his labor. It was not a grand house, but it was strong and warm, filled with the good smells of baking bread and the gentle light of many candles. Here, within its sturdy walls, Mia and Elijah's love story continued to unfold, season after peaceful season. Their marriage was a quiet, steady rhythm, like the faithful beating of a single heart shared between two people. Mornings began with prayers of gratitude spoken together at the rough-hewn kitchen table, and evenings ended with shared silence on the porch, watching the stars pepper the vast, dark sky over the mountains. Elijah's gentleness, once a promise spoken to calm a frightened girl, was now the very foundation of their home. His large hands, which could so easily split firewood, were impossibly delicate when they helped Mia with the tiny buttons on the back of her dress or brushed a stray strand of hair from her cheek. Years seemed to pass in a contented blur, marked by the joyful rhythms of life, planting and harvest, summer picnics by the creek, and winter spent cozy by the roaring fire. Then came a new and wondrous season, the promise of a child. Mia's joy was a radiant thing, a quiet light that seemed to shine from within her. Elijah's own happiness was a more profound, awe-filled emotion. He would often rest his great hand on her growing belly, his touch feather-light, his eyes wide with a mixture of reverence and a protective love so fierce it sometimes stole his breath. He built a cradle from seasoned oak, sanding the wood until it was as smooth as silk, his every stroke a prayer for the tiny life that would soon rest within it. They spent their evenings talking of names and dreams, their faith a sturdy anchor, their love a safe harbor. The night the baby decided to come was a wild one, with a late autumn wind howling around the corners of the house, rattling the window panes. The midwife, a sturdy, calm woman named Agnes, had been summoned and now moved about the bedroom with a quiet efficiency. But for Mia, the world had shrunk to a small, pain-filled space. The contractions were a tempest, crashing over her with a force she had never imagined, stealing her breath and her courage. Fear, cold and sharp, began to creep into her heart. She clutched at the quilt, her knuckles white, tears of pain and fright squeezing from the corners of her eyes. "I cannot," she whispered, her voice thin and strained. "Elijah, I cannot do this." In an instant he was there, kneeling beside the bed, his large frame making the floorboards creak. He did not flinch or look away from her pain. He simply took her small, trembling hand in both of his own, enveloping it completely. His touch was not weak, but it was infinitely tender, a solid and unshakable rock in her raging sea. "Look at me, my love," he said, his voice a low, steady anchor in the storm. "Just look at me. The Lord is our shepherd. We shall not want. He maketh me to lie down in green pastures." He began to recite the psalm, his voice never wavering, his eyes holding hers with a love that was stronger than any pain. He prayed aloud, not for the pain to stop, but for strength, for courage, for safe delivery. He wiped her brow with a cool cloth, his movements slow and sure. In his presence, Mia's panic began to recede. Her fear did not vanish, but it was met and matched by his unwavering strength. She focused on his face, on the familiar lines of love and faith, and she held on, drawing from his calm the courage she needed to continue. After many long, dark hours, a new sound filled the room, the strong, healthy cry of a newborn. It was a sound that silenced the howling wind and made the weary night feel brand new. Agnes expertly cleaned the baby, wrapped him in a soft, homespun blanket, and placed him gently into Mia's waiting arms. Exhaustion and a love so powerful it felt like a physical force washed over Mia. She looked down at the tiny, perfect face, at the little nose and the scrunched-up eyes, and she began to weep, but they were tears of pure, unshadowed joy. "Oh, Elijah," she breathed, her voice full of wonder. "Look at our son. He's so small." Elijah, still kneeling by the bed, looked from his wife's radiant, tear-streaked face to the tiny bundle in her arms. His own eyes filled with tears that he did not try to hide. He reached out one of his large, work-roughened fingers, and the baby, with the instinct of new life, uncurled a miniature hand and wrapped all 5 of his tiny fingers around it. The contrast was breathtaking, the immense strength of the father held in the utter trust of the son. Overcome with emotion, Elijah leaned forward and whispered the same words he had spoken a lifetime ago in a dusty general store, words that were now the foundation of his entire world, a vow renewed for a new generation. "I'll be gentle." In the days and weeks that followed, the little house was filled with a new and profound peace. They named the boy Benjamin, a name meaning son of my right hand, for he was the fulfillment of all their hopes. Mia watched Elijah with the baby, her heart swelling with a love she thought could not possibly grow any deeper. He would cradle Benjamin in the crook of his massive arm, his hand supporting the baby's head with a care that was almost holy. He would hum old hymns as he rocked the cradle, his deep voice a soft rumble that always lulled the baby to sleep. Their love, which had begun with a promise of gentleness, had now multiplied, creating a new life that was cradled in that same sacred promise. Their story was a testament to the truth that the strongest foundations are built not on power, but on patience, that the most courageous hearts are those that choose faith over fear, and that a love rooted in God's grace is a love that truly lasts forever. They had faced rejection and found a second chance. They had held on to faith and been blessed with a love that built a family. As they sat together on the porch, watching the sun set behind the mountains, Mia resting her head on Elijah's shoulder and Benjamin sleeping peacefully in her arms, they knew a quiet, complete joy. They had their forever after written not in grand adventures, but in the gentle, daily acts of love, a story that would continue to be told in the lives of their children and their children's children. If you have enjoyed this story of gentle strength and faithful love, consider subscribing for more tales that warm the heart and strengthen the spirit.